Greetings, fellow tarot travelers. Tripping through the tetrahedral triptych of cards I shall now lay before you. I'm Tarot Torch, and I have a very interesting concept I'd like to share with you. Russia has been paying down its debt as a byproduct of current sanctions. Inflation did increase in Russia as expected in 2018 through 2019, but less than expected. The Russian government has a surplus of 2.7% of GDP, and Russia has a balance of payment surplus on its debt of $110 billion. Russian enterprises and the Russian government have only $450 billion in external debt, which is less than its reserves held by the central bank at $470 billion. In theory, Russia could now pay off all its external debt and still have money left over. With a budget surplus, a trade surplus, and a solvent debt, Russia has put its financial system in order. Russia is now able to decouple from the Western financial system. With BRICS, large purchases of Chinese currency and gold, and growth at a very steady 2% per year, the prospects look good. Since Russia set up their payments for debt to be paid in their own alternative to SWIFT for debt payments and has developed its own alternative to MasterCard and Visa, Russia is now potentially a financially liberated country. All these positive economic indicators are due to, believe it or not, the sanctions and Russia's response to the sanctions. Can Russia serve as a model for other countries like Venezuela for economic liberation? Russia is self-sufficient, has a strong government and a strong military. Each of these components are necessary to be freed from Western economic imperialism. Libya and Iraq tried, and they were invaded. If China takes the same tact, these two emerging superpowers could lend military protection for less qualified countries to try the same through BRICS financial services and assistance. Is Russia rising as a superpower? Will Russian military advancements in technology, as with hypersonic missile systems, make Russia preeminent in the world? Are we going to have a dual financial system and a Cold War between these two systems? Are Venezuela, Crimea, and Syria to serve as opening salvos to a possible hot war? Will Iran be a militant terrorist arm of this new economic order through Hezbollah's international operations? Will the FSB interfere with other elections worldwide besides the U.S. elections as Russia garners international economic supremacy? Well, once again, we have some very big questions, and because we are addressing Russia, I've chosen the tarot by Alexander Danilov called Born in the USSR. Because when we don't have the answer to questions, then it is time to bring forth the tarot cards, because even if they don't answer the questions, they certainly will have something to say. And it's when we don't know that we find solace in hearing the counsel of an alternative source. The cards are not meant to lead us by the nose. They're simply meant to help explain things from a different viewpoint. And so, what is it with Russian economic solvency? The first card is the Wheel of Fortune. Now, the Wheel of Fortune represents just good luck. I mean, it looks like Yeltsin standing on top of the tank there on the Wheel of Fortune. And of course, he had his rise and his fall. And Gorbachev had his rise and his fall. And they keep going around and round and round in the Russian wheel. And the Wheel of Fortune says that Russia's been lucky at this point. It's funny how the Russian economy came into being. There was the Soviet Empire, and these cards are old Soviet propaganda pictures that were posted up throughout Moscow and Russia during the Soviet Union years, making it a very interesting and eclectic deck for analyzing Russian studies. And what happened is at the fall of the Soviet Empire, basically thieves went around selling tanks. You want to buy 100 tanks, we'll sell you 100 tanks. You want to buy 50 nuclear warheads, we'll sell you nuclear warheads. Why, we'll sell you the government building. And they went around stealing what they could from the fallen government because there was no police, there was no infrastructure, there was no military, and sold it to the highest bidder. And these people who stole then rose in economic power and later become the legitimate oligarchs that are supporting Russian nationalism and the Russia of today. They are the economic leaders in Russia today. And it's been like a ride on the Wheel of Fortune. First, there was extreme poverty in the Soviet Union, where people stood in bread lines for hours to spend their whole daily working wage on a piece of bread. And then the whole country was wholesaled out so that oligarchs could rise in power. And now, with oil discoveries and with the economic planning of the Russian government, they are economically solvent and becoming a world economic leader. It certainly has been a wild ride round and round. The next card is the Hanged Man. Now, the Hanged Man tends to represent a stasis, a standing still process. This poor Hanged Man seemed to have lost his head. And this old Soviet poster, no doubt, is showing the price of crime. But here, in this tarot application, it means that Russia has had its ups and downs and has emerged on top for the time being. But where it's at currently is in a stalemate, in a standoff. It can't really go forward. The Western system is holding it still. Russia can't simply go into Venezuela and take their oil. Russia can't simply go into Syria and defeat Israel. Russia can't simply have BRICS replace the IMF overnight. Right now, there's a stagnation occurring as Russia builds its economic strength, but it's not able to move. It's still in a planning phase. And the final card, Strength. Strength in these tarot decks for politics tends to represent the will of the people. And this deck, because it's only higher arcana, only selects from the most powerful cards in a tarot deck. And so, in this instance, what's happening here is that although Russia is on top now and is still in a planning phase, there may be political restructuring. Perhaps once the deficit is gone and Russia's economy is on the rise, the people will now vote Putin out of office. You know, that happened in the West, where Churchill served his purpose, and once the war was over, Churchill was out. Putin may have saved Russia from a kleptocracy in the post-Soviet empire to help restructure and create the current economically solvent world-leading nation it is today. But as soon as his job is done, he may be out of a job. He may be over. Because strength means the will of the people comes forward. Now let's find out what this will of the people are, or is. It is a will of people that want justice. The people of Russia are tired of being treated like prisoners and being persecuted. They want justice. They want to have control of their own government. And personally, knowing that they're close to Estonia, I recommend you see my Estonia video. They know what it's like to have participation in government. Watching Estonia have a cyber government with a cyber democracy. Perhaps the Russian people would like that because they want some justice for the past abuses. And below, well, there's the card of democracy, the moon. I mean, this could represent space travel, but I don't think that's the case, although I wouldn't write it off. In this application, what I think is that the Russian people are going to take their economic solvency And instead of taking the rest of the world to the cleaners, although military domination of the world is always in the cards for Russia, I think they're going to want a higher level of democracy and a higher level of social justice. I think the Russian people want to have their votes count and they want to choose their leaders. I think with all the money that they can be given, liberation isn't enough. They want justice and they want freedom. And I think that's where the cards are telling us things are leading. And although in the hypersonics videos, military domination of the world through hypersonic technology may be another passing place in the wheel of fortune, what Russia really wants more than money and military domination is freedom. Freedom to choose their own government and freedom to vote on every little thing the government puts forward with computers. One thing that material success does provide for is the ability for everybody to have a laptop and to vote on everything. Why shouldn't government be a public affair? It's for running public affairs.